Hi, Britt Davenport here, and welcome to another episode of On the Vise, brought to you by Hackles and Herl Fly Fishing. Tonight we're tying a fly pattern called the Royal Trude. This is a fly that I really enjoy fishing our first trip up to the North Fork each year. In the spring, the fish just seem to love it, although they probably love just about any food at that point. So with that, let's get to the vise. So for the hook, we're just going to be using an Ahrex dry long barbless, which is an FW571 and a size 12. You can tie them smaller if you wanted, but I've never had a need to. Size 12 seems to work just fine for the trout early season for us. For thread, we're just using a classic waxed A-dot Semperfli in black. So I'm going to start my thread, and I'm going to start it at about the 2/3 point. We've got a lot of stuff to put on this fly, and we need to make sure to leave room at the front of it for the hackle. So I find starting it back that way just helps me get a better gauge for how far forward I can go and what space I have to work with when I'm working on the body. So we'll dress our hook shank. For the tail, we're just using some golden pheasant tippet. So you'll also often find them in stores like this or in single packs. This is a great use for these smaller ones here at the bottom. The larger ones you can use for salmon flies. But this is a great use for these little ones. What I like to do is I kind of pull back and just strip off all these little stragglers. So we're left with just a nice clean stem. And then I'm actually going to go in and trim out the tip of that. So it helps if you kind of pull them forward, because we don't want that stiff stem in our tail. We'll just trim that out. Pull those fibers back down again. And so you're left with just kind of a little notch out of it. You can then fold them over. You want your tail to be about the length of the hook shank, maybe a little bit shorter since we're using a longer hook. And then you can do just a pinch wrap. If you do 2 light wraps, you can then pull them through to the length that you want. And then we're going to incorporate that feather into our body. You'll see why later. Trim the butt ends out. And then we'll take our thread back to the rear of the fly. For the back part of the body, we're using Peacock Herl. So if you have a peacock eye, this is the best spot to get them from. They tend to be a little fuller in this area. So I'm going to take 3 pieces of that. 3 pieces. I'm going to break those tips off. I'm going to tie these in. And again, we're just working these materials into the length of that body. We don't want it to be lumpy or anything like that at our tie-in points. Okay, go ahead and throw your half hitch in. And then I like to take my fingers and just run them up the peacock herl so it stands all those little flues out. And I'm just going to pull it over right with my thread. So normally we would take this all the way over to our thread post. We don't need that much of it. So I'm just going to do a short version of the dubbing rope. Spin that up. So now we've got that nice floofy peacock herl rope. I'm going to take a few wraps of that. And then we'll tie that off. You can also do just a single piece of herl and wrap it, but it won't be reinforced if you do it like that, so it'll be more susceptible to breaking. I was taught to tie this with a gold rib over that center section. I guarantee you the fish don't care, but it's just how I was taught to tie it. I'm going to tie that in on the rear side. And again, we're just going to take that the whole length of that body. Use a hair clip to just hold that out of the way. Now for the red section in the body, I'm using red micro-glint. The classic pattern calls for red floss, so you could use that as well. I like a little bit of glimmer in it, especially for those early trout. I'm going to go ahead and throw a half hitch in. And now keep in mind we need room for some more peacock herl, our wing, and then our hackle. So on this fly, you constantly have to be thinking about how far up you're taking things. It's really, really easy to crowd the head on it. We're going to just take that up. And I've just got this on just a standard bobbin. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with. And so see how we built that body up underneath there? If we didn't do that, it'd be very skinny and just wouldn't look very nice. I'm going to go ahead and tie that off. And trim that out. Next, we're going to put another half hitch in. Bring our bobbin over to our thread post. And then we're just going to take some wraps of the, and I forgot to say what that is. It's just Semperfli Micro-Glint in gold. It's just like a really fine tinsel. So we're going to take a few wraps of this. You really can't fit many in, and that's fine. Like I said, it's just how I was taught to tie it. I guarantee you the fish don't care if there's wraps of this or not. Try to get them even, but again, it's more just for looks. So much of what we do is just to catch fishermen, not so much the fish. So again, we're going to take some more peacock. I'm going to take 3 more pieces. Break those tips off since they're usually the more fragile part. And I'm just going to tie these in. And be mindful, we want to leave that front a little bare because we've got a wing and a hackle to put in still. And put a half hitch in. Take those and just kind of pull those flue out so they stand out away from the stem. And then we're just, again, we're going to make a small peacock dubbing rope. You can probably hear my dog barking in the background, because heaven forbid we do a video without that. Okay, so we're going to tie that off and just trim those out. I want to make sure, now I am going to put thread over this because I want something for that wing to sit on. And for the wing, we're just using white calf tail, or kip tail is what you might call it. So a lot of times we use the longer stuff higher up, but for this we can actually use the kind of short ones here down at the bottom. And that's getting really washed out, so I apologize for that. I'm gonna trim a clump of those out. So I've got a pretty good clump. We're going to clean that out so it's not going to be near as big. So grab onto it. If you grab the tips and go like that, it'll kind of clear out some of those shorter ones in the under fur. So you can tie it in like this if you want. You can stack it. It's not going to stack great because it's just the nature of the hair. What can help with it though is if you spray them with Static Guard, something I learned from Alan Gretchen Beatty. If you spray it with Static Guard and then brush them out, they A, look a lot nicer, and B, also stack a little bit better. I'm just going to pull out any short ones, any that just don't belong. And now I like my wing to go about halfway back on the tail. So just take a measurement. We're going to trim that butt end off. If you spin your thread counterclockwise, it should jump to the rear and help grab that material. We're just going to bind that down right up against that peacock. This can be a very slippery material, so one way to lock that wing in is to lift it up, take a wrap behind it, and then over the top again. And that just kind of locks it in. Now for the hackle, we want to have a nice base down. I like to have a nice sloping base. And the hackle we're using is it's just a Coachman Brown from Collins. Absolutely love this color. And it's just appropriately sized for the hook shank, so nothing weird there. Now for the tie-in point, I am going to cut some of those fibers off. So it's got little nubbies for the thread to grab onto. And then I'm also going to pull a few of them off above that. That way on that first wrap, it sits correctly and we don't have a ton of them going to the rear of the fly. If you want, you can put a half hitch in here and use the rotary function of your vise, or you can do it by hand, whichever you prefer. Even if I do use the rotary function, I do like to take that first one by hand just to make sure that it's not going to twist on me. And if it does twist, you can kind of manhandle it around a bit to get it where you want it. Go ahead and tie that off. And then I like to kind of pull it back and dogleg it in there and just build that head right up against it. And that way I know that's not going to pull out. There we go. I'm going to trim that hackle out now. And then you can finish it however you'd like. I'm just going to do a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. Make sure that thread is seated. And then we're just going to go in and trim that thread out. If you want, you can certainly apply a bit of head cement. I'm using some Solar Lac. I'm just going to put a drop there just to make sure. Those fish are awful feisty in the spring, so I want to make sure we get plenty of fish out of this. And so there we have it. It's a Royal Trude. Great little pattern for the spring, early summer months here in Idaho. I don't fish a lot for brook trout, but I feel like it might be a really good little brookie fly too. So next time I'm on one of our small creeks, I'll have to give it a go in a smaller size. So with that, thank you for joining us. And again, we're just very grateful for everybody that takes the time to watch, and hopefully you learn a little bit from it. We try to do just pretty basic flies, and show the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we break our thread, you're gonna see it. So the dog barks, you're gonna hear it. So again, thank you for spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave us a comment if you're still inclined. With that,